Okay, so it seems like we're diving into the world of baking operators today. You've got your sights set on a career that involves creating delicious food on a grand scale. And I gotta say, who doesn't love that amazing bakery smell?
Oh, absolutely. It's a sensory experience like no other, but trust me, there's a lot more to it than just the enticing aromas. We're talking about a fascinating fusion of culinary arts and industrial level precision.
Right, it's a whole other world compared to just whipping up some cookies at home. Think massive operations, industrial ovens, the whole nine yards.
So, where do we even begin with unpacking this?
Well, picture this. You step into a huge commercial bakery. The air is thick with that warm, yeasty, sugary scent. You hear the hum of these giant mixers, and conveyor belts are moving trays of dough through these towering ovens. And right at the heart of all this is the baking operator.
The maestro of the bakery orchestra, you could say?
Exactly. They're the ones orchestrating that entire baking process from A to Z. And these days, that means working hand in hand with some pretty impressive technology. That's actually what I wanted to ask about. You mentioned automation earlier. What kind of technology are we talking about here, and how does it actually affect a baking operator's day-to-day work?
Let's take something like a dough mixing system, for example. So instead of mixing all the ingredients by hand, a baking operator might be working with a computerized system that precisely measures out and mixes huge quantities of flour, water, yeast, all those ingredients. And they need to understand how to control the system, monitor how it's doing, and troubleshoot any problems that might pop up.
So it's a lot more technical than just following a recipe.
Absolutely. A baking operator needs to be comfortable with the science behind baking and the artistry of it. They need to understand how all these different factors like temperature and humidity can affect the final product. Essentially, they're taking those traditional baking methods and translating them to a large-scale industrial setting.
That makes sense. They're like the bridge between the old ways and the new, so they're managing these automated systems. But what about the actual baking itself?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. They're the ones setting the pace for the whole production line, adjusting those conveyor speeds, keeping an eye on baking times and temperatures, all while making sure that each and every batch meets those strict quality standards.
That sounds pretty demanding, especially with everything moving so fast.
It definitely can be demanding. Large commercial bakeries operate on really tight schedules, often running 20/47 to keep up with the demand.
So we're talking long hours, potentially working different shifts, and a physically demanding environment.
Yeah, that's often the reality. They could be on their feet for hours at a time, lifting heavy trays of dough, working right next to those hot ovens. It's a different world from grandma's kitchen.
Definitely not your typical kitchen.
Yeah.
But I imagine there's a certain sense of satisfaction that comes with seeing those picture-perfect baked goods coming off the line, knowing you were a vital part of making that happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a real feeling of accomplishment in producing top-notch baked goods on such a large scale. It's about taking pride in the work you do and knowing you're part of a team that's putting out a product people genuinely enjoy.
And speaking of those picture-perfect baked goods, what are some of the big challenges when it comes to quality control?
Well, those ovens can be a bit finicky. Keeping the temperature and airflow consistent inside those things is super important for making sure everything bakes evenly of you. Imagine dealing with an oven that has hot spots or uneven heating.
Oh yeah, that could lead to some real baking disasters.
Exactly. A baking operator needs to be able to spot those inconsistencies and adjust things on the fly, like they might have to calibrate the sensors, adjust airflow, or even rearrange the trays in the oven to get that even bake. It's all about problem solving and having a really good eye for detail.
So it's this balancing act between managing the tech and understanding those age-old baking principles.
Exactly, and that's not even everything. They also have to deal with variations in ingredients like flour. Flour can absorb different amounts of moisture depending on things like protein content, and the humidity a baking operator needs to know how to spot these variations and adjust the dough's hydration to make sure the results are consistent.
Wow, I never realized how much nuance there is to this role. It's like being a scientist and an artist at the same time.
It's a really interesting combination of skills, that's for sure, and it's not just about reacting to problems, it's also about anticipating them. A really experienced baking operator can often tell if something's off just by looking at the dough or watching how the oven's behaving.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So experience really does matter in this line of work.
Yeah.
What about someone who's just starting out? What kind of training or background do they need to get their foot in the door?
Well, a formal culinary degree isn't always a deal breaker, though it can definitely give you a leg up. Many baking operators get that valuable experience through on-the-job training.
So starting out in an entry-level position at a bakery and working their way up.
Exactly. It's a great way to learn the ropes, get a feel for the workflow, and get some hands-on experience with the equipment.
And I bet those soft skills like teamwork and communication are super important too, especially in a fast-paced setting like that.
Absolutely. Baking operators are often part of a team, so being able to communicate clearly and work well together is essential. They might be coordinating with the mixing operators, packaging teams, even the maintenance folks.
Sounds like a career path where you can keep learning and growing, even if you don't have tons of experience to start with.
That's one of the great things about this field. It's open to anyone who's passionate about baking, willing to learn, and not afraid of a little hard work.
Now, you mentioned earlier how technology is changing the baking industry. Do you think automation will eventually replace the need for baking operators entirely?
That's a question that comes up a lot, and it makes sense with how fast things are changing with automation. But I actually think baking operators will still be essential for the foreseeable future, even with these advancements.
And why is that?
Machines are great at doing the same thing over and over and making really precise measurements, but they still can't match that human touch when it comes to sensory perception and adaptability, which is so important in baking.
That makes sense. You can't program a machine to have a baker's intuition.
Exactly. A baking operator can pick up on subtle changes in the dough's texture, the aroma, even the sound of the oven that might indicate a problem. They can make judgment calls based on years of experience and their senses that a machine just can't replicate.
So it's all about that synergy between human expertise and all these technological advancements.
Precisely, it's about using technology to be more efficient and consistent, but also recognizing that skilled baking operators bring unique skills and knowledge to the table that you just can't replace.
It's reassuring to know that there will always be a demand for those human skills, no matter how advanced technology gets. Now, you mentioned earlier that there are some resources out there that could be really useful for anyone interested in this career path. You specifically mentioned RoleCatcher. Can you tell us more about them and how they can help aspiring baking operators?
Definitely, RoleCatcher is more than just your typical job board. They have all these tools and services designed to help job seekers stand out in today's competitive job market.
So it's not just about finding open positions, it's about making sure your application actually gets seen.
Exactly. They offer things like AI-powered CV and application optimization, which can be a game changer for getting past those automated screening systems that so many companies are using these days.
That's so key these days when it feels like everything's automated. It's easy to feel like your application just disappears into the void. So having a tool that helps you stand out can be a game changer.
It really can be, and it's not just about getting noticed, it's about making sure you're putting your best foot forward. RoleCatcher also has things like interview prep tools, which can be super helpful.
So you can practice answering those common interview questions and actually get feedback on how you're doing.
Right.
That's amazing. It's like having your own personal interview coach.
Exactly. They've thought of pretty much everything to help people feel prepared and confident throughout the whole process, from applying to that final interview.
Sounds like an amazing resource,
Yeah.
especially for a career like this where those practical skills and hands-on experience are so important. It's not just about what's on paper. It's about showing them you can handle the heat in a fast-paced environment like that.
Absolutely. And that passion for baking, that genuine excitement for what you do, it really
Yeah.
shines through in an interview.
It's that look in your eye when you talk about a perfectly risen loaf of bread or the smell of fresh-baked cookies. You just can't fake that.
No, you definitely can't. It's contagious, that passion, and it's something employers in the baking world are really looking for.
So to wrap things up, for anyone listening who might still be on the fence about becoming a baking operator, what would you say are the most rewarding parts of this job?
Well, besides the obvious, getting to create delicious food that brings people joy, I think it's that blend of tradition and innovation. You're taking this ancient art of baking and bringing it into the modern world with all this new technology.
Best of both worlds.
Exactly. You're always learning, solving problems, pushing the limits of what you can do. And at the end of the day, you can look at all those perfectly baked goods coming off the line and know you were a part of making that happen.
And maybe even snag a little treat for yourself.
Gotta keep up with quality control, right?
Exactly. Well, this deep dive has been amazing.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but I am suddenly craving a warm, crusty loaf of bread. Maybe a croissant on the side, too.
Sounds like a plan.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of baking operators. We hope you learned something new about this rewarding and dynamic career path. And remember, whether you're a seasoned baking pro or just starting out, there's always something new to discover in the incredible world of baking.